What is up, everybody? Welcome to another weekend roundup here on Touchline Talk. Two primary games to get to today. Before I jump in, though, as always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week. Like I said, two games, going to focus on the Premier League today, starting, of course, with what happened at Goodison Park. Everton beats Arsenal in Sean Dyche's first game. I'm going to spend most of my time on the Everton side of this, so I want to start with Arsenal and kind of get that out of the way. Simply put, Arsenal finally had a bad game. You can maybe argue Southampton was bad, but other than that, it's what I've been talking about that's been so impressive about this team. Even the Manchester United loss, they played really well. And of course, they've won, a vast majority of their games. But it's never really felt like they have just been outplayed until this game. Everton were simply the better team. And it happens sometimes, which is where Arsenal puts us in, as fans, as evaluators, puts everyone in this weird spot. Because they have been so consistent and so good that this was really jarring. And at the same time, games like this happen sometimes. It's not the end of the world. But it's so shocking how bad Arsenal were because you just haven't seen this kind of performance before. Ultimately, though, even had Manchester City won, and we'll get to that game next, I still wouldn't be worried. I am not worried at all. It's a bad game in a tough environment against a team with a new manager bounce, with new ideas, a little bit of relief and kind of hope. It happened. Still very confident in Arsenal. My belief in them does not waver one bit because of what happened in this game. The key is to stop it from snowballing, which is what they've done this season and what I expect them to do again coming out of this game. But if you start dropping points in back-to-back games, that's where I start feeling differently. But Arsenal have not done that this season. I don't think that's going to change. On the Everton side, I went on my long speech as Frank Lampard was being fired and Everton were looking at replacements about why Sean Dyche was the option for this job. The clear choice, the clear best choice. And you can attribute some of this to a new manager bounce. There's probably some validity to that. But you do not get the dramatic, remarkable improvement you saw on that field simply because you changed managers. You get it because you brought in a guy who can immediately get your team to do all the things Everton were not doing. All of the things that Everton's failure to do had them in the relegation zone and looking like the worst team in the Premier League. It's the exact stuff that Sean Dyche made a living on at Burnley. Effort, intensity, organization. One of the first things and easiest things to fix when you're in a position like Everton is just getting things lined up defensively. The goal scoring part, and I'll get to that later, is more difficult to fix. But just being compact and fundamentally sound, that's all Sean Dyche knows how to do. It's what he's best at. You can fix that very quickly. And of course, the effort and intensity part of this is also a prerequisite for getting on the field and a team managed by Sean Dyche. And so what did you see? You saw, I saw these stats about, all these guys running their longest distances of the season. You saw them going through kind of a preseason training with the beep test, which is not typically something you see in the middle of the season, but Sean Dyche kind of started from scratch and kind of went to a condensed preseason even to reorganize this entire thing. And so, Dwight McNeil is running back and forth. The midfield was spectacular. And what you heard from those fans who were confronting Yerry Mina, confronting Anthony Gordon, just show us you care. Put in the effort. And boy, did they in this game. But a lot of that is Sean Dyche. This doesn't need to be more complicated than he dramatically overachieved at Burnley and got the absolute most out of that group of players. With little, finances to work with, without much offensive talent, he maximized what he had. So it's only logical to assume he's going to do it here too. And the other part of this is from a Everton specific standpoint, from a club vibes standpoint. Just the idea that you can put in that kind of effort is going to make supporters feel better. It's going to lift the mood, even if the results didn't come the way they did in this game. Even if it's not going to be pretty all the way moving forward. Just putting in that kind of effort changes the conversation and the relationship between this club and its fans. Because a lot of the frustration wasn't with Frank Lampard. But if you feel like there's just nothing more you can ask out of a group of players, there is something to that, and that is what Sean Dyche is going to give you. Because these players responded. And then there's the offensive side of this. I said in laying out my case for Sean Dyche, you cannot just assume he is going to do this exact same things he did at Burnley because he's smart enough to know what he was working with. So what does Sean Dyche do? He comes out on a 4-5-1, not a 4-4-2. Works brilliantly. And by the way, not only did Everton score the goal in this game, I know it came off of a set piece. And not only were they brilliant defensively, they tied the highest against Arsenal, who have been phenomenal defensively all season. They produced what was tied for the highest expected goal total of any of Frank Lampard's last 12 games in the Premier League. It's almost like Sean Dyche isn't married to playing incredibly boring, direct, unappealing football. He is intelligent enough to understand how to maximize what he's working with. And Everton created chances in this game outside of that goal. They deserved that goal. They're going to be better in attack than you would expect or just assume if you are falling into this kind of putting Sean Dyche into a box trap. You have got to take the context of that Burnley situation and think about what Sean Dyche did and how that will translate, because I'm just not convinced that is what he philosophically believes is the only way to have success. It's the best way to have success when you're Burnley. Everton gives you different opportunities. That's what you saw in this game. I'm surprised they won. I'm not surprised they looked that much better immediately. This is not complicated. Sean Dyche is really good at all the things Everton needed their manager to be really good at. It only makes sense they have dramatically improved immediately. Second game, Tottenham, Manchester City. It looked for a second there like this is going to be another case of Spurs trying to give a game away. They were really shaky at the start. And then just kind of out of nowhere, they get a turnover. Manchester City continue to be uncharacteristically sloppy. I can't figure out what it is. It's mind-boggling to me, and I'm sure infuriating to Pep, because that might be the single thing he despises the most, is losing possession. And so you get the turnover. There goes Harry Kane. He breaks his tie with Jimmy Greaves. He is now the all-time leading scorer in the history of Tottenham. He also got his 200th Premier League goal. Same goal. So, very well timed by him. Congratulations, Harry Kane. Very interesting legacy conversation to have at some point, not today. Kevin De Bruyne didn't start this game. I don't know why. I will never understand this idea that somehow Manchester City are better with him on the bench. That's not because Julian Alvarez doesn't deserve to start. I just simply think Kevin De Bruyne is the most valuable player on this team. And so Mahrez hits the crossbar. De Bruyne comes on for Mahrez. They start looking a lot better. And then you get the Christian Romero red card. No, you don't want to take the edge out of him. At the same time, there's a balance that can be struck. That first yellow was completely unnecessary. If you are going to play on the edge, don't make your life harder than it has to be by picking up yellows for nonsense. That was my issue with Romero. The second one, it happens. He probably had to make that tackle. The issue is the first one because you're just asking for trouble by picking up the yellow you didn't need to take when you're going to take enough already because you're Christian Romero. But, so City really start getting going, just can't get the goal. And so even though Arsenal lost, they still hold their lead. The strange world we're living in where Arsenal and Tottenham fans are celebrating together the Tottenham victory. I don't have too much just on this game in general. Manchester City just can't win in that stadium. That's another really interesting part of this. Haaland was nowhere to be found. It's the same struggles we've seen from Manchester City. And Tottenham got away with the mistakes they did make. They avoided making the catastrophic ones. And unlike the last time, it never snowballed on them. They didn't let City get that first goal to kind of get the comeback going. Because obviously it just fell apart and Riyad Mahrez ripped them to shreds in the second half the first time these teams met. This time, defensively, they were really good. You saw some really good individual performances across the board. You got your goal. Son looked lively. It was just a really good performance. And these are the kind of games that happen. And, Spurs have had success against City. These are the kind of games that happen, which is why Arsenal being so consistent and Manchester City slipping becomes such a problem. Because they have not been a team that's going to go reel off 15 to 20 straight wins like you felt like they could at any second when they were picking up, 98, 99, 100 points. Sure, they're capable of it, but there's usually a slip up here or there. And there are teams in this league, be it United, be it Spurs, be it Arsenal, who can go toe-to-toe with them right now. And so, to me, this is more about Manchester City cannot get back into this title race. Arsenal have to invite them back in. And one loss at Goodison on the same weekend where Manchester City pick up 0 points is not going to do that. It's a title race because obviously Arsenal, aren't running away with it yet. But this is Arsenal's to lose, and it will be until they allow Manchester City to gain ground and Manchester City actually gained that ground. This would be a different conversation if they won this game because you still have 2 head-to-head meetings coming up. But you still have the exact same problem because they continue to struggle against Spurs on the road. A couple other things really quickly to mention. Seattle Sounders, valiant performance, really good showing at the Club World Cup. They lose to Egyptian side Al Ahly in their first game. Very, very late goal. They were probably the better team. Their attack was really rough because, they haven't played a competitive game since October because they didn't even reach the playoffs. That's to be expected. It's just a difficult situation to be in, playing all these teams who are in the middle of their seasons as you're starting your preseason. Brian Smetzer's trying to figure out what his best lineup is. You've got new players coming, players leaving, and you don't get to experiment at all before this because this is part of your preseason. So, yes, it would have been awesome if they got to play Real Madrid. It would have been great for the league. It would have been a great memory for their fans. Would have been great for CONCACAF. But ultimately, the bigger point was go there, show you belong, make a good showing for yourself. The Sounders absolutely did that. It's just going to be a real battle for any MLS team coming into this competition because of the way the schedules work. I don't know what else you could have asked of from the Sounders. That's the best compliment I can give. You have to, if you're a Sounders fan, if you're somebody who wanted the Sounders to succeed just from an MLS perspective, I think they did everything you could have asked from them. So congratulations on the experience. Nearly got to play Real Madrid, didn't quite, but very, very good debut and kind of first impression for Major League Soccer in the Club World Cup. Bayern Munich finally got a Bundesliga win, came out with a vengeance, started ripping off goals left and right, then allowed a couple goals, but they looked like Bayern again. We'll see if this continues. Everybody else also pretty much won. When you think Union Berlin, you think Borussia Dortmund. So that gap is still really tight at the top of the league, but Bayern do get past a difficult test against Wolfsburg. And then finally, one of your more high-profile matchups in terms of clubs over the weekend, AC Milan, Inter Milan, Milan derby. AC Milan don't put a shot on goal. When it's not the bad defense, it's the inability to create anything in attack. I mean, this has just fallen off a cliff. They're trying to save the. I mean, this is about trying to save Champions League at this point, and I'm not sure they can do it. This was a perfect game if you can just kind of rally the troops, get this win, to turn things around and get yourself right back into that top four conversation. And instead, Inter gain more ground. Napoli just do Napoli things. They're going to cruise to this title. You've got all these other, your Lazios, your Atalantas, all these teams hanging around, even with Juventus out of the picture. It's not like this is just something that's going to be handed to AC Milan, and they're throwing it away. So I wanted to mention that this is another, just the score lines, the degree to which they are struggling is astonishing. And it's coming, as you're getting ready to get back into the Champions League, which maybe that's the kind of jolt of inspiration they need, and they go on a run of the Champions League. It fuels a sort of recovery in Serie A, and they finish the season strong. Or you're now even splitting your focus even more, and they can't recover from Serie A in time because they're more focused on the Champions League, and it ends up being a negative. Going to be really interesting to see how this goes, but Inter, dominant performance, get the win in the Milan derby. That is all for the weekend roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.